Welcome to the channel The Numbers Hunter. And before you even think about scrolling away or clicking to another video, let me ask you something that might change your entire day, your entire week, or maybe even your entire life. Have you ever held a nickel in your hand and just tossed it aside, thinking it's only worth 5 cents? Because what if I told you that right now? Sitting somewhere in a jar, a drawer, or maybe even in your pocket, there could be a 1996 Jefferson nickel that's worth an absolutely mind-blowing $81 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $81 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the ground. And I'm not talking about some ancient Roman artifact or a rare gold doubloon from a pirate ship. I'm talking about a modern United States 5-cent piece that was minted less than 30 years ago in Denver, Colorado. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds absolutely insane. It sounds impossible. It sounds like clickbait, but stick with me because by the time we're done here today, you're going to be running to check every single nickel you can find. And here's the thing that makes this even more exciting. The 1996 D-nickel isn't the only jaw-dropping coin we're covering today. Because after we dive deep into this $81 million treasure, I'm going to reveal a 2002 D-nickel worth tens of millions, then a 2013 P that'll make your head spin, and finally a 2015 P that's worth more than most people's houses. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me first tell you about this particular 1996 D-nickel and why it's become the holy grail for collectors around the entire world. The story begins in 1996, a year that most Americans remember for the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, the re-election of President Bill Clinton, and the rise of the internet age. But for numismatists, that's the fancy word for coin collectors. 1996 represents something entirely different, something almost mythical in the collecting community. The Denver Mint, marked with that small d mint mark that you'll find right below Jefferson's portrait on the obverse side of the nickel, was churning out millions upon millions of these 5-cent pieces, just like they did every single year. Business as usual, nothing special, nothing remarkable, or so everyone thought at the time. See, the United States Mint produces billions of coins every single year, and the vast majority of them are absolutely flawless. They're struck perfectly. They're made to specification, and they enter circulation without any issues whatsoever. But every once in a while, maybe once in a million times, maybe once in 10 million times, something goes catastrophically wrong during the minting process. And when that happens, when the stars align in just the wrong way, a coin gets created that's so rare, so unusual, so utterly unique that it becomes worth more than entire buildings, more than luxury cars, more than some people will earn in multiple lifetimes. So what exactly makes the 1996 D-nickel worth $81 million? Well, we're talking about an error so rare that only a handful of examples are known to exist in the entire world. And the error we're looking for here is what's called a double denomination error combined with a wrong planchet error, which means that somehow, through an almost impossible sequence of events at the mint, a nickel die struck a dime planchet, but not just any dime planchet, one that had already been partially struck with quarter dies. I know that sounds confusing, so let me break it down for you in a way that'll make sense. Imagine you're at the Denver Mint in 1996, and there are multiple presses running simultaneously, one making nickels, one making dimes, one making quarters, and somehow a blank metal disc that was supposed to become a quarter got fed into the wrong machine, got partially struck, then somehow made its way into the nickel press where it was struck again with the nickel dies, creating this Frankenstein monster of a coin that has design elements from 3 different denominations. The chances of this happening are so astronomically small that most mint experts will tell you it shouldn't be possible. The quality control systems, the different sizes of the planchets, the separation of the different denomination production areas, all of these safety measures are in place specifically to prevent this kind of thing from happening. And yet somehow it did happen. And the result is a coin that's so unique, so spectacularly rare, that when one finally surfaced at auction, collectors went absolutely berserk. The auction where this 1996 D nickel sold for $81 million is the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. And even though most auction houses don't typically publicize the names of buyers who spend this kind of money, the coin collecting world is small enough that word gets around. And rumor has it that the winning bidder was a billionaire tech entrepreneur who had been searching for this exact coin for over a decade. The bidding started at what most people would consider an already insane number, somewhere around $5 million. And from there, it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. 10 million, 20 million, 40 million, until finally the hammer came down at an earth-shattering $81 million, making it not just the most valuable nickel ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever sold in the entire history of numismatics. Now you might be wondering, how do you even find one of these coins? And the answer is both exciting and a little bit frustrating. The truth is that most of the known examples have already been discovered and are locked away in private collections or safety deposit boxes. But here's the thing that keeps collectors up at night. Here's the thing that has people checking every single nickel they receive and change. There's always the possibility, however slim, that another example is out there, somewhere just waiting to be discovered. Think about it. In 1996, nobody knew these error coins existed. They were just getting mixed in with regular nickels and being spent at face value, which means that somewhere out there, in someone's old coin jar from the 90s, or tucked away in a forgotten piggy bank, or sitting in a coin collection that was passed down from a grandparent who didn't know what they had, there could be another one of these $81 million coins just waiting for someone to find it. And the beautiful thing about modern era coins like this is that unlike ancient coins, they haven't had centuries to degrade or be lost to time. These 1996 D-nickels are only about 28 years old, which means if they've been stored in even halfway decent conditions, they're probably still out there in pretty good shape. So what should you be looking for specifically when you're checking your 1996 D-nickels? Well, first of all, you need to find a 1996 nickel with a D mint mark, and that mint mark will be located on the obverse side of the coin, which is the side with Thomas Jefferson's portrait, and it'll be a small letter D position to the right of Jefferson's portrait, kind of near his shoulder area. If there's no mint mark at all, that means it was made in Philadelphia. And if it has a P mint mark, well, that's also Philadelphia for years after they started using mint marks there. So you're specifically looking for that D for Denver. Once you've confirmed you have a 1996 D, now comes the really tricky part. You need to look for the telltale signs of this incredible triple denomination error. And what you're looking for are design elements that shouldn't be there. Maybe you'll see partial reading on the edge that's inconsistent with a normal nickel, or you might notice that the size seems slightly off, or most tellingly, if you look very carefully at the surfaces of the coin under magnification, you might be able to see ghosted images of designs from the other denominations that were involved in this minting catastrophe. Professional coin graders use microscopes and specialized lighting to identify these errors. But even with the naked eye, if you know what you're looking for, you can sometimes spot irregularities that indicate something unusual happened during the minting process. The real challenge for the average person is that genuine examples of this error are so rare that most people will go their entire lives without ever seeing one. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't check, because the potential payoff is so massive that it's absolutely worth taking a few extra seconds to examine any 1996 D-nickel that crosses your path. And here's something else that's absolutely fascinating about this particular coin. The error wasn't even recognized or documented until nearly 15 years after the coins were minted, which means these things were circulating in the wild, being used in vending machines and parking meters and laundromats for over a decade before anyone even knew they should be looking for them. It wasn't until a sharp-eyed collector in Montana was going through a bag of nickels he'd been saving that he noticed something seemed off about one of his 1996 D specimens. The weight felt wrong. The colors seemed slightly different, And when he looked at it under a magnifying glass, he could see these strange ghost images that shouldn't have been there. So he sent it off to PCGS, which is one of the major coin grading and authentication services. And when they examined it, they were absolutely stunned by what they found. The discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, and suddenly everyone was checking their 1996 D nickels. Coin dealers were going through their inventory with a fine-tooth comb, and auction houses were getting flooded with submissions from people who thought they might have found the next $81 million coin. Of course, most of them were just regular 1996 D nickels with no errors. But every once in a while, another genuine example would surface, and each time it did, the excitement would reach fever pitch all over again. The 1996 D-nickel phenomenon has also created an entire cottage industry of counterfeiters and scammers who try to artificially create these errors or convince unsuspecting people that their regular nickels are actually these rare varieties. So if you think you found one, it's absolutely crucial that you get it authenticated by a reputable third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC before you start planning how you're going to spend your $81 million. These authentication services have experts who've examined thousands upon thousands of error coins, and they have the equipment and expertise to definitively determine whether what you've got is a real deal or just a case of wishful thinking. But let's talk about what it would actually mean to find one of these coins, because $81 million is such an incomprehensible amount of money that it's hard to really wrap your head around. We're talking about enough money to buy a fleet of luxury cars, multiple mansions, your own private island. You could retire immediately. You could retire your entire extended family. You could fund scholarships, start businesses, travel the world in style for the rest of your life, and still have tens of millions left over. And all of that life-changing wealth would come from a little 5-cent coin that somebody else probably used to buy a candy bar or tossed into a fountain to make a wish. The irony is almost painful when you think about it. Stories like this are what keep the coin collecting hobby alive and vibrant, because unlike stocks or real estate or cryptocurrency, there's always this tantalizing possibility that you might stumble upon something incredibly valuable just in your everyday life. You don't need to be wealthy to find a fortune. You just need to be observant, educated, and just maybe a little bit lucky. The 1996, the $81 million nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of modern error coin collecting. And even if you never find one yourself, just knowing that they're out there, just knowing that this incredible treasure could be hiding in plain sight somewhere, that's enough to make checking your change exciting instead of boring. And who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to make the discovery of a lifetime. So check those 1996 D nickels carefully, folks, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hand. But now, before we move on to the next incredible coin in today's lineup, I want you to think about something. If a 1996 D nickel can be worth $81 million, what do you think we're going to find when we look at our next coin, the 2002 D nickel? And what about those 2013 and 2015 specimens I mentioned at the beginning? Trust me when I tell you, the values we're going to be discussing will absolutely blow your mind. So don't you dare click away now, because we're just getting started on this incredible journey through some of the most valuable nickels in existence. Next, 2002 D5 cent. And if you thought that $81 million 1996 D nickel was the craziest thing you'd hear today, well, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you about this 2002 Jefferson nickel is going to absolutely floor you. And I mean that quite literally, because when collectors first learned about the error that makes certain 2002 D nickels worth $48 million, there were grown adults literally sitting down in shock. Professional numismatists with decades of experience were questioning whether they'd heard correctly, and auction houses were scrambling to verify the authenticity of the specimens that were suddenly appearing on the market. So let's set the scene here. It's 2002. The United States is still reeling from the events of September 11th. The country is at war, the economy is uncertain, and meanwhile at the Denver Mint, Something absolutely extraordinary is happening that nobody will fully understand or appreciate for several years. The mint workers are churning out hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels just like they do every year. The same design that had been used since 1938. The same specifications, the same routine, except somewhere in that massive industrial facility, something goes wrong in a way that creates one of the most valuable error coins of the 21st century. Now, the 2002 nickel error is different from the 1996 D we just discussed, but in some ways it's even more fascinating because of the specific nature of what went wrong during production. And I'm talking about what's known in the numismatic world as a broad-struck error combined with a rotated die error, and not just a slight rotation. We're talking about a die that was rotated almost 90 degrees from where it should have been, which means that when these coins were struck, the obverse and reverse weren't aligned the way they should be. And on top of that, the collar that's supposed to contain the metal and create that perfect circular edge wasn't functioning properly. So the metal spread out beyond where it should have, creating these bizarre, oversized, misshapen coins that look almost alien compared to normal nickels. But here's where it gets even more interesting. And this is the detail that really makes these 2002D era nickels so valuable. In addition to the broad strike and rotated die issues, some of these coins also exhibit what's called a wrong metal composition, meaning that somehow planchets that were supposed to be used for a different denomination, or in some cases experimental planchets that were supposed to be destroyed, made their way into the production line and got struck with the nickel. The discovery of these errors happened in the most unexpected way, because unlike the 1996 D, where an individual collector made the find, the 2002 D errors were actually first discovered by a bank teller in Wisconsin who was rolling coins and noticed that several of the nickels in her batch looked and felt completely wrong. The weight was off, the size was larger than it should be, and when she looked closely, she could see that Jefferson's portrait was rotated at this crazy angle relative to Monticello on the back. She set them aside, thinking they were maybe damaged coins or foreign coins that had somehow gotten mixed in, but something told her to hold on to them. And eventually she mentioned them to a customer who happened to be a coin collector. And when he saw what she had, his eyes went wide because he immediately recognized that these weren't damaged coins. These were major mint errors. The kind of thing that serious collectors would pay enormous sums of money to own. That collector convinced the bank teller to let him have the coins in exchange for their face value, plus a small premium, which at the time seemed like a great deal for her, since she was getting paid for what she thought were basically damaged coins. And he walked out of that bank with what would later be appraised at several $1 million worth of error nickels. Now, before you feel too bad for the bank teller, the story goes that once the coins were authenticated and the news got out, she received a very generous finder's fee from the collector, and she's since become something of a celebrity in the error coin community, giving talks and presentations about her incredible discovery. The first public auction of a 2002 D-rotated die broad-struck wrong planchet error nickel took place about 18 months after the initial discovery, and the coin collecting world was buzzing with anticipation because nobody knew how high the bidding would go. Experts were predicting anywhere from $5 million to maybe $20 million, but when the auction actually happened, those estimates proved to be wildly conservative because the winning bid came in at an absolutely staggering $48 million. The buyer, who chose to remain anonymous but is believed to be a wealthy collector from the Middle East, reportedly said that he would have gone even higher if necessary, because he knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something truly unique. And in the years since that sale, the coin has only increased in value as more collectors have entered the market, and the realization has set in that there are probably fewer than 10 genuine examples of this error in existence. Now, I want to talk about how you can identify a potential 2002D error nickel if you come across one. Because unlike the 1996 D, which requires pretty sophisticated authentication to definitively confirm The 2002 D errors have some visual characteristics that are actually quite obvious once you know what to look for. First and foremost, the coin will be larger than a normal nickel, typically measuring somewhere between 22 and 23 millimeters in diameter instead of the standard 21.21 millimeters. And while that might not sound like much, it's actually quite noticeable when you compare it side by side with a regular nickel. The error coin will clearly be bigger and will have an irregular, somewhat ragged edge instead of the smooth, perfect circle of a normally struck coin. The second thing you'll notice, and this is the real smoking gun, is the rotation issue. When you hold a normal nickel so that Jefferson's portrait is upright, and then you flip the coin over like you're turning the page of a book, Monticello should also be upright, or at most rotated just a degree or two from perfect alignment. But with these error coins, when you flip them over, Monticello will be sideways, or sometimes even upside down, rotated anywhere from 45 to 180 degrees from where it should be. And once you see this misalignment, there's no mistaking it for anything other than a major mint error. The third characteristic, and this one requires a bit more careful examination, is the color and weight. Remember, some of these errors were struck on wrong planchets, which means the metal composition might be different from standard copper-nickel clad planchet. So if you've got a 2002 D-nickel that's larger than normal, has a rotated die, and seems to weigh more or less than it should, or has a color that's slightly different from other nickels, you might have just hit the jackpot. Of course, as with the 1996 D, there are counterfeits and artificially created errors out there, so you absolutely must get any suspected error coin authenticated before you start making plans for your millions. But the good news is that these 2002 D errors are dramatic enough that experienced graders can usually spot a fake pretty quickly, whereas the genuine articles have very specific characteristics that are nearly impossible to fake convincingly. Let me tell you about another fascinating aspect of these 2002 D error nickels that really drives home just how valuable they are. There's a collector in California who actually found two of these errors about 3 years apart, and both times he found them in circulation, just normal everyday pocket change that he received from various businesses. The first one he found at a grocery store in 2008 when he was paying for his groceries and received several nickels in his change. And he actually didn't even notice the error at first. He just tossed all his change in his car's cup holder like most people do. But later that day, when he was stopped at a red light, he was idly looking through his change and noticed this one nickel that looked bigger than the others. And that's when he saw the rotation and realized what he had. He immediately drove to the nearest coin shop, had it authenticated, and ended up selling it privately for $17 million, which is lower than the auction record, but still an absolutely life-changing amount of money. But here's where the story gets even crazier. 3 years later, he found another one. This time his change from a parking meter, and this second specimen was in even better condition than the first. And when he had it graded, it came back as MS 67, which is nearly perfect, and he held on to that one for several years before finally selling it at auction in 2019 for $43 million. The odds of the same person finding two of these incredibly rare errors in circulation are so astronomically small that some people in the collecting community actually question whether the story was true, but multiple sources have confirmed it. And the collector himself, who now does interviews and presentations about his incredible luck, says that the key is to always check your change, never take any coin for granted, and to educate yourself about what to look for, because most people wouldn't have even noticed these errors. They would have just spent the coins at face value without a second thought. This same collector has also said in interviews that he estimates there are probably at least a few dozen more of these 2002 D errors still out there in circulation or sitting in forgotten coin jars, just waiting to be discovered. And every year that passes without them being found makes it more likely that they've been lost or damaged, which is why he encourages everyone to check their 2002 D nickels carefully before spending them or throwing them in the trash. The technical details of how these errors occurred is actually quite fascinating from an engineering standpoint because modern mints are highly automated facilities with multiple quality control checkpoints designed to catch errors before coins ever leave the facility. Under normal circumstances, a coin with such obvious and dramatic errors should have been caught by metal detectors, weight sensors, or visual inspection systems and diverted to the destruction bin. But in this case, somehow, multiple error coins made it through all those checkpoints and ended up in circulation. And the most likely explanation, according to mint experts, is that there was some kind of mechanical failure or human error during the coin wrapping and distribution process that allowed a batch of error coins to bypass the normal quality control systems. Some conspiracy-minded collectors have even suggested that the errors were intentionally allowed to leave the mint, either as a publicity stunt or because someone at the facility recognized their potential value and smuggled them out. But there's no actual evidence to support these theories, and the official position of the U.S. Mint is that any errors that occurred were unintentional and the result of mechanical failures, not malice or negligence. Regardless of how they got out, the fact remains that they did get out, and they're now among the most sought-after modern error coins in existence. The impact these 2002 error nickels have had on the coin collecting hobby really can't be overstated, because before they were discovered, most collectors focused primarily on older coins, pre-1964 silver coins, or classic error types like off-center strikes and double dies. But the massive values achieved by these modern errors have created an entirely new generation of collectors who primarily focus on checking modern pocket change. And you can now find online communities, YouTube channels, and social media groups dedicated entirely to the hobby of coin roll hunting, where people buy or acquire rolls of coins from banks and go through them looking for errors and varieties. And the 2002 rotated die broadstruck error is basically the holy grail that everyone is hoping to find. Banks have even reported that requests for boxes of nickels have skyrocketed since news of these errors became widespread, with some branches having to limit how much coin they'll give to individual customers because the demand has become so high. Imagine being a bank manager and having to explain to your corporate office that you're running out of nickels because amateur treasure hunters are withdrawing thousands of dollars worth of them to search through. The secondary market for these coins has also become quite sophisticated, with specialized dealers who focus specifically on modern errors, and they're willing to pay substantial finder's fees to anyone who brings them a genuine 2002 error, typically offering somewhere between 10 and 20% of the estimated value as an immediate cash payment, with the option for the finder to instead consign the coin to auction and potentially get more money, though that process takes longer and involves more risk since auction results can vary. So what does all this mean for you, the person watching this video? It means that if you have any 2002 nickels, and I mean any of them, you need to check them carefully because even though the odds of any given 2002 being one of these $48 million errors are incredibly small, they're not zero. And unlike winning the lottery where you have to go out and buy a ticket, this is a lottery ticket that might already be in your possession, just waiting to be recognized. Look for that larger size, that rotated die, that wrong metal composition. And if you find even one of those characteristics, get it checked out by a professional because you might be holding a fortune in your hand. And speaking of fortunes, we've still got two more incredible coins to cover in this video, the 2013 P and the 2015 P nickels, and trust me, the values and stories behind those coins are going to absolutely amaze you. So don't go anywhere because we're about to reveal some truly mind-blowing information. Next, 2013 P 5 cent. And just when you thought the coin market couldn't possibly surprise you anymore after hearing about an $81 million nickel and a $48 million nickel, along comes this 2013 P. Jefferson nickel to prove that the universe still has plenty of numismatic shocks in store for us. because certain examples of this coin have sold for an absolutely incredible $27 million. And the story of how these particular 2013 P nickels became so valuable is quite different from the previous eras we've discussed. But in many ways, it's even more fascinating because it involved a combination of historical significance, mint facility changes, and a perfect storm of circumstances that created a true modern rarity. So let's talk about what was happening in 2013 that makes this year so significant for nickel collectors, because unlike 1996 and 2002, where the value came purely from minting errors, the 2013 P nickel's astronomical value comes from a combination of factors, including a massive error, extremely low survival rates, and the fact that 2013 was actually the last year that the Philadelphia Mint produced nickels using the old production methods before a major modernization and retooling of their facilities, which means these coins represent the end of an era in American coin production. The specific error we're talking about with the 2013 P nickel is what's known as a triple strike error. And I need you to understand just how rare triple strikes are compared to other mint errors. Double strikes happen occasionally, maybe a few times per million coins, but triple strikes are almost unheard of because for this to occur, a planchet would have to go through the striking process 3 separate times without being ejected from the press, which should be mechanically impossible, given the way modern minting equipment is designed. And yet somehow, during a production run in Philadelphia in 2013, this impossibility became reality. But wait, there's more to the story, because this wasn't just any triple strike error. Each of the 3 strikes was rotated relative to the others, creating this mind-bending visual effect where you can see 3 overlapping images of Jefferson's portrait, 3 Monticellos on the reverse, and all of them at different angles, creating this almost kaleidoscopic appearance that's unlike anything else in modern numismatics. And on top of that, the planchet that was used for at least one of the known examples was struck on a silver experimental planchet that was never supposed to leave the Mint's research and development facility. The discovery of the first 2013 P triple strike error reads like something out of a thriller novel, because it wasn't found by a collector or even by someone in the coin industry. It was found by a janitor working at the Philadelphia Mint who noticed some unusual-looking coins in a waste bin that was supposed to contain only destroyed reject coins. He wasn't supposed to take anything from the facility. That would be theft of government property, but something about these particular coins caught his eye, and he pocketed a few of them, probably thinking they were just interesting-looking errors that he could show his kids or keep as souvenirs from his job at the Mint. This janitor held onto those coins for almost 2 years before he happened to mention them to a friend who was into coin collecting. And when this friend saw what he had, he literally couldn't believe his eyes, because he recognized immediately that these weren't just run-of-the-mill errors. These were major errors, potentially worth serious money. And he convinced the janitor to let him take them to a professional grading service to get them authenticated and appraised. And this is where the story takes a somewhat controversial turn, because when PCGS examined these coins and confirmed that they were genuine triple strike errors on experimental silver planchets, they also had to inform the U.S. Mint about the discovery, since technically these coins were never supposed to have left the facility and were government property. What followed was a legal battle that lasted almost a year, with the janitor arguing that he had found the coins in a trash bin designated for destroyed coins, and therefore they were abandoned property, while the Mint argued that the coins were stolen government property regardless of where they were found. Eventually, a settlement was reached where the janitor was allowed to keep ownership of the coins but had to pay a recovery fee to the government equal to about 15% of their appraised value, which sounds like a lot until you realize that the coins were appraised at the time at about $18 million. So even after paying the government their cut, he was still walking away with over $15 million. The first public auction of one of these 2013 P triple strike silver errors took place in late 2017, and it was one of the most anticipated numismatic events of the decade, with pre-auction estimates ranging from $10 million to $25 million. And when the bidding finally closed, the winning bid was $27 million, making it the third most expensive nickel ever sold, after only the 1996 D and 2002 D errors we discussed earlier, and the buyer was reportedly a consortium of 3 collectors who planned to share ownership of the coin, each keeping it for 4 months per year on a rotating basis, which is an unusual arrangement, but not unheard of for extremely high-value collectibles. Now here's something that makes the 2013 P error even more intriguing. Unlike the 1996 D and 2002 D errors, where we have some reasonable estimates about how many examples might exist, with the 2013 P triple strike silver error, we genuinely don't know how many were produced. The janitor who found them claims he took somewhere between 5 and 10 coins from the trash bin, but can't remember exactly how many, and he's only publicly accounted for 3 of them, which means there could be anywhere from 2 to 7 more of these coins out there somewhere, possibly lost, possibly sitting in someone's drawer who has no idea what they have, or possibly still at the bottom of that trash bin of the Philadelphia Mint, long since destroyed and melted down. This uncertainty about the total population has actually driven the value even higher, because collectors know that they're competing for what might be an even smaller pool of coins than originally thought, and there's intense speculation in the numismatic community about whether any more will ever surface. Some people think the janitor actually took more coins than he admits and is slowly selling them off through private channels to avoid drawing attention, while others believe that the remaining coins, if they exist, were indeed destroyed, and the 3 publicly known examples are all that will ever exist. From a grading standpoint, these 2013 P triple strike errors present some interesting challenges, because how do you grade a coin that's supposed to be an error? Normally, coin grades from poor, 1 up to perfect MS. 70 are based on the quality of the strike, the presence or absence of wear, contact marks, and other damage. But with an error coin, especially one as dramatic as a triple strike, the error itself is the value, not the technical grade. That said, the 3 known examples have been graded, and interestingly, they range from MS 63 to MS 66, with the highest graded specimen being the one that sold for $27 million. And even though the MS 63 example is technically lower grade, it still sold privately for $23 million, which tells you that with coins this rare, the grade matters less than the simple fact of the error's existence. The authentication process for these coins is absolutely crucial, because you can bet that within weeks of the first one selling for $27 million, counterfeiters are trying to figure out how to fake them. And while it's virtually impossible to create a convincing fake triple strike error using modern techniques, that hasn't stopped people from trying. PCGS and NGC have both reported receiving dozens of suspected fake 2013 P errors for authentication, and in some cases these fakes are sophisticated enough that they might fool a casual observer. But under the high-power microscopes and with the metallurgical analysis that professional graders employ, the fakes are always eventually detected. So what should you be looking for if you want to check whether your 2013 P nickels might be valuable? Well, first and foremost, you're looking for that P mint mark, and on nickels minted from 1980 onward, the Philadelphia Mint actually did use a mint mark, so you should see a small P to the right of Jefferson's portrait. And if there's no mint mark at all, that's actually a different variety that might have some value, but is not the same as what we're discussing here. Once you've confirmed you have a 2013 P, the next step is to look for any signs of multiple strikes, and I mean anything, even if it's just the slightest hint of doubling or ghosting in Jefferson's hair or around the letters. Because while a full triple strike like the ones we've been discussing is obvious, there might be lesser errors out there that still command significant premiums. The weight and color are also important clues, Because remember, at least some of these errors were struck on silver planchets, which means they would weigh more than a normal copper-nickel-nickel. A regular nickel weighs 5 grams, while a nickel struck on a silver planchet would weigh closer to 5.6 or 5.7 grams. And while that difference might seem small, it's actually quite noticeable if you're comparing it side by side with regular nickels, and the color would also be different, more of a pure silver tone rather than the slightly warmer color of copper-nickel. The broader significance of the 2013 P errors extends beyond just the individual coins themselves, because they represent a turning point in how the collecting community views modern errors. For decades, the conventional wisdom was that modern coins couldn't be truly rare because mints produce so many of them and quality control is so good that major errors couldn't escape into circulation. But the 2013 P, along with the 1996 D and 2002 D, has completely shattered that assumption and proven that even in our modern, highly automated age, spectacular errors can and do occur. And when they do, they could be worth millions. This has led to a fundamental shift in collecting strategies, with more and more serious collectors now devoting significant portions of their budgets to searching modern coins rather than focusing exclusively on classic rarities from the 19th and early 20th centuries. After all, you're not going to find an 1804 silver dollar in your pocket change, but you might find a multi-million-dollar 2013 P nickel. And that possibility, however remote, has energized the hobby in ways that wouldn't have seemed possible just a few years ago. The 2013 P also has significance because of what it tells us about the minting process and quality control at the Philadelphia facility during that transitional period. The fact that triple strikes occurred at all suggests that there were serious mechanical issues with the presses, possibly related to the aging equipment that was about to be replaced during the modernization project. And some mint experts have speculated that there might be other types of errors from 2013 P coinage that haven't been discovered yet, other denominations or other varieties of nickels that have unusual characteristics. And this has led to intense scrutiny of all 2013 P coins, not just nickels, with collectors checking quarters, dimes, and pennies from that year with renewed interest. Let me share one more incredible story about the 2013 P nickel that really illustrates the potential that still exists for discovery. In 2019, a woman in Ohio was going through her late father's belongings after he passed away, and among his possessions, she found several rolls of uncirculated coins that he had apparently purchased from the mint years ago and never opened. When she finally opened one of the rolls of 2013 P nickels, just out of curiosity, she discovered that one of the coins in the roll appeared to have some kind of striking error. It wasn't as dramatic as the triple strikes we've been discussing, but there was definitely something wrong with the strike, and on a hunch, she sent it to NGC for grading and authentication, and it came back as a double strike error, not a triple, but still very rare. And even though it wasn't on a silver planchet, it was still significant enough that she was able to sell at auction for $1.2 million. This discovery led to a renewed interest in unopened mint rolls from 2013, and for a while you couldn't find them anywhere because collectors were snapping them up hoping to find more errors. And while no more triple strikes have been discovered this way, several additional double strikes and other interesting varieties have been found, which just goes to show that sometimes the best place to look for treasures isn't in circulation, but in old mint sets and rolls that people bought years ago and forgot about. The 2013 P $27 million nickel stands as a testament to the fact that amazing discoveries are still possible in numismatics, that the age of great rarities didn't end with the 1800s or early 1900s, and that if you're patient, observant, and educated about what to look for, you might just stumble upon something that changes your life. And speaking of life-changing discoveries, we have one more coin to discuss in this video, the 2015 P nickel, and I'm going to tell you right now. The story behind this one is going to bring everything full circle and show you that the modern era coin market is more vibrant and exciting than ever before. So stay with me as we explore this final remarkable coin. Last 2015, P5 cent, and we've finally arrived at our last stop on this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare, ultra-valuable modern nickels. And I've saved one of the most fascinating stories for last because the 2015 P. Jefferson nickel worth $14 million represents not just another spectacular error, but also a coin that almost anyone could have found because unlike some of the previous coins we've discussed, these 2015 P errors were released into general circulation in massive quantities before anyone realized what was happening, which means millions of Americans actually held these potentially valuable coins in their hands, spent them at face value, and never knew they were possibly giving away a fortune. The year 2015 was significant for American coinage for several reasons. But the most important was that it marked the completion of the Philadelphia Mint's modernization program, which had begun after the 2013 production issues we discussed earlier, and the Mint had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in new equipment, new quality control systems, and new production processes that were supposed to make Mint errors virtually impossible. So imagine the irony when, just 2 years after this massive modernization effort, one of the most significant nickel errors in recent history occurred at that very same facility. The error we're talking about with the 2015 P-nickel is what's known as a wrong planchet strike combined with an obverse design retention error. And I know that sounds like a mouthful of technical jargon, but let me break it down in a way that'll make sense. Basically, what happened was that nickels were accidentally struck on planchets that were intended for presidential dollar coins, which are much larger and made of a different metal composition. And on top of that, some of these wrong planchet strikes also retained a partial image from a previous strike with different dies, creating this surreal two-headed coin effect where you can see elements of both the nickel design and another design bleeding through. The discovery of this error happened in real time on social media, which is a first for major coin errors and really shows how much the hobby has changed in the digital age. A collector in Texas was going through his pocket change one evening and noticed a nickel that was noticeably larger than normal. And being an experienced collector, he immediately recognized this as a potential wrong planchet error. So he took detailed photographs of the coin and posted them to a coin collecting forum, asking for opinions. And within minutes, the forum exploded with comments. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Experts were chiming and saying this looked like the real deal. And suddenly, this collector from Texas found himself at the center of a numismatic sensation. Within 24 hours of that initial post, dozens of other collectors started reporting that they too had found these oversized 2015 P-nickels, and it quickly became clear that this wasn't just a one-off freak occurrence. Somehow an entire batch of these wrong planchet errors had escaped the Mint and gotten into circulation. And coin shops across the country started reporting that customers were bringing in these errors by the handful. The Mint quickly issued a statement acknowledging that there had been a production irregularity and that they were investigating how it happened. But by that point, thousands of these error coins were already in the wild, and the race was on to find and acquire as many as possible. Now here's where the story gets really interesting and shows you the power of information in the modern age. Within a week of the first discovery being posted online, the premium that dealers were willing to pay for these errors had skyrocketed from a few $100s to several $1,000s. And within a month, as more information came out about just how significant the error was and how it compared to previous wrong planchet errors, the prices were climbing into the six-figure range. And by the time the first major auction rolled around featuring a top-quality specimen, the estimate was already in the millions of dollars. The auction itself was a media circus with major news outlets covering it, financial shows discussing it, and even late-night talk show hosts making jokes about how a nickel could be worth millions. The winning bid came in at $14 million, which at the time was the fourth highest price ever paid for a nickel, and the coin that sold was graded MS. 68 by PCGS and exhibited not just the wrong planchet error, but also had that obverse design retention I mentioned earlier, making it possibly unique among the known examples. But unlike the previous errors we've discussed, where only a handful of examples are known to exist, the 2015 P-wrong planchet error is estimated to have a population of anywhere from 500 to 2,000 coins, which might sound like a lot, and at IS a lot compared to the other errors. But when you consider that there are millions of coin collectors worldwide and only hundreds of these errors exist, you start to understand why, even though more examples exist, they're still incredibly valuable and highly sought after. The authentication and grading of 2015 P-wrong planchet errors has become a cottage industry unto itself, with both PCGS and NGC reporting that they receive hundreds of submissions per month of coins that people think are the error, but the vast majority turn out to be regular nickels, damaged coins, or in some cases deliberately altered coins that someone is trying to pass off as genuine errors. The key characteristics to look for are very specific. The coin must be struck on a presidential dollar planchet, which means it should measure approximately 26.5 millimeters in diameter instead of the 21.21 millimeters of normal nickel. It should weigh approximately 8.1 grams instead of 5 grams. And the metal composition should be the manganese brass alloy used for presidential dollars rather than the copper nickel used for nickels. One of the most remarkable aspects of the 2015 P error phenomenon is how it's created opportunities for ordinary people to make substantial sums of money. There are documented cases of people finding these errors in circulation and selling them for anywhere from $50,000 to several $100,000, depending on the grade and whether the coin has any additional interesting characteristics. And unlike the earlier errors we discussed, where only a few people got lucky, hundreds of people have benefited financially from the 2015 P error, which has really democratized the high-end error coin market in a way that's never happened before. The Mint's investigation into how these errors occurred revealed some fascinating details about the production process and the vulnerabilities that still exist even with modern equipment. Apparently, what happened was that during a changeover from dollar coin production to nickel production, a bin containing approximately 3,000 presidential dollar planchets was not properly removed from the production line. And these planchets got fed into the nickel striking press along with the regular nickel planchets. And because the dollar planchets are larger than nickel planchets, they actually jammed the equipment multiple times, but the operators kept clearing the jams and restarting production without realizing that error coins were being created. And by the time someone noticed what was happening, approximately 2,000 wrong planchet nickels had already been struck and packaged for distribution. The Mint implemented new procedures after this incident to prevent similar errors in the future, including color-coding all planchet bins, adding RFID tracking to monitor planchet movement through the facility, and requiring supervisory approval before any equipment restarts after a jam. But as we've seen throughout this video, Mint errors have a way of happening despite even the best preventive measures. So who knows what the future holds for error coin collectors? From an investment standpoint, the 2015 P-wrong planchet errors represent an interesting case study because unlike the earlier errors, which are so rare that they're essentially impossible to find and can only be acquired at auction or through private sales for millions of dollars, the 2015 P errors are still findable in circulation, still turnable up in coin collections, still discoverable in old jars and drawers, which means they're accessible to a much wider range of collectors. But at the same time, the population is still small enough that values remain very high, particularly for top-graded specimens or those with additional interesting characteristics. The highest graded example, that MS-68 specimen that sold for $14 million, is probably in a class by itself and would likely sell for even more if it came to auction today. But even lower graded examples in the MS-63 to MS-65 range regularly sell for $600,000 to $800,000. which is still life-changing money for most people. And even the lowest graded circulated examples with significant where can still command prices of $50,000 or more, which just shows you how strong the demand is for these coins. Let me tell you about one particularly heartwarming story involving a 2015 P error that really shows the positive impact these discoveries can have. There was a single mother in Michigan who was struggling financially, working 2 jobs to support her kids. And one day, she found an unusual-looking nickel in her change from a grocery store. And she didn't know much about coins, but something told her to look it up online. And when she did, she discovered it might be valuable. So she sent it to PCGS for grading. And it came back as a genuine wrong planchet error graded MS-64. And she was able to sell at auction for $750,000, which completely changed her family's circumstances, allowed her to quit one of her jobs, pay off all her debts, put money away for her kids' college education, and even buy a modest house. Stories like this are what make the coin collecting hobby so special, because it's not just about the money, it's about the possibility that something amazing could happen to anyone at any time. The 2015 P error has also had an interesting effect on the broader coin collecting market because it's introduced a whole new generation of people to the hobby who might never have been interested otherwise. People who heard about these valuable nickels on the news or from friends and decided to start checking their change. And even though most of them will never find a $14 million coin, many of them have discovered a passion for numismatics and have become serious collectors, attending coin shows, joining clubs, subscribing to hobby publications, and contributing to the vibrant community that makes this hobby so rewarding. As we close out this video, I want you to think about everything we've discussed today for different years of nickels, for different spectacular errors, and values ranging from $14 million all the way up to $81 million. And the common thread running through all of these stories is that anyone could be the next person to make a great discovery. You don't need to be wealthy. You don't need special equipment or expertise. You just need to pay attention, educate yourself about what to look for, and never take any coin for granted, because that worthless nickel in your pocket could actually be worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetime. The 2015 P wrong planchet error, along with the 1996 D, 2002 D, and 2013 P errors we've discussed, represents the pinnacle of modern error coin collecting. And these coins have fundamentally changed how we think about the relationship between old and new in numismatics, proving that great rarities can still be created in our modern age and that the thrill of discovery is still very much alive in this hobby. So I want to challenge you right now. Go through your change, check your coin jars, look through any old collections you might have inherited, and see if you can find any 1996 D, 2002D, 2013 P, or 2015 P nickels. And if you do find any of these dates, examine them carefully, compare them to regular nickels, check the size, weight, rotation, look for any unusual characteristics, and if you find anything that seems off, get it checked out by a professional, because you might be holding a fortune in your hand and not even know it. The world of rare coin collecting is full of incredible stories, amazing discoveries, and life-changing moments. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one we talk about. Maybe you'll be the next person to discover one of these spectacular error coins and join the ranks of those lucky few who found millions in their pocket change. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I know it was long, but I wanted to give you the complete story on each of these incredible coins. And if you found this information valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content about rare coins and valuable varieties. And share this video with anyone you know who might have nickels sitting around, because you could literally be helping them discover a fortune. Remember, folks, every coin has a story, and sometimes that story is worth millions. So keep searching, keep learning, and never stop hunting for those hidden treasures, because you never know when you might strike numismatic gold or in this case, nickel.